Hello, my dear viewers. Today I'll be talking about something different. As I was saying before, I might be talking about World War II. So I'm talking about more or less of a normie subject about World War II. That is Operation Barbarossa. I am more intrigued about the political machinations of the time rather than military ones. But I did start with military, and of course I expanded my knowledge, so I can talk about it. At this point, it's hard for me to tell if it's autism that forced me into understanding World War II more, or just the subject being this interesting. I mean, that war almost happened 100 years ago. Well, soon it will be 100 years, and that soon is in 13 years. Anyway, let's start talking about this operation. When Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa on 22nd June 1941, he famously said that the world held its breath, with him being right, as it was at the time, and to this day, it is the biggest military invasion in human history. Of course, we live in the future and we know what happened and that Hitler failed in his invasion, but what were the Germans thinking? What was their plan for this invasion? Why did they think it would succeed? Or were they even thinking it would succeed? A border of 1,000 kilometers reaching from Memel to Bessarabia in Romania divided the Axis and Soviet forces. Many Western analysts and strategists, upon realizing what just happened, were, well, let's say, a bit scared of what just unfolded. In Washington and London, both sides thought that the Germans actually will win this battle. After all, the British troops were fighting in Libya against the Wehrmacht. Also, there had been a very negative opinion about the Soviet forces, which didn't really win in Finland. Also, let's not forget that within the Axis powers, the thought of victory was strong within the public opinion as well. Everyone knew at the time that Germany, or Nazi Germany, was at the peak of its power. Soviet Union, meanwhile, was deeply wounded by the NKVD purges and Stalin's paranoia. And also in the West, and of course inside the Axis powers, people thought that such brutalized people that lived under Stalin and communism will simply give up the fight because of the brainwashing and the tortures that they endured. They will simply give up against such a mighty foe. What they failed to see is that brainwashing works. It every time works. People think that brainwashing doesn't do anything. It does. Every single time it works. And what it does to people, it makes them really stupid and really loyal to the cause. Before the Lenin, and before, of course, Stalin and communism, people of Russia were not Russians. There was Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, Tatars, Chuvash, Georgians, Armenians, Azeris, Siberian peoples that I can't name except Tuvans and Yakuts, and many other nationalities. What this brainwashing achieved was creating a monolith that everyone inside Soviet Union is a Russian because they all share the same language. They all share the idea of communism that unites them. They shouldn't be infighting, and of course they had NKVD to enforce this thought. Identity of a culture was erased and replaced by the monolith of Soviet race, if you can call it that, of course. But anyway, let's go back to the thinking of Western countries and of course Axis powers that they are going to win this war. They set themselves premises. They didn't really check what is gonna happen. They didn't simulate what would happen in the scenario. They just had an idea of what would happen because what Soviet Union did before and what Germans did before. That is, Germans constantly winning battle after battle, dominating the Allies, and Soviets being horrible strategists. And of course, let's not forget the Great Purge and all the other stuff. There's also this very negative stereotype about Barbarossa, where a Soviet soldier is a stupid tool that just gives up each time he sees a German army advancing. That is in the Western media. And in the East, that is in Russia itself, the Soviet soldier is a guy who always fights till the bitter end. But the reality lays somewhere in between because some national groups just gave up guns when they saw Germans, such as the Muslim minorities. But that wasn't so often. That wasn't the most. That was less than 1/10 of the Soviet army. And the German is portrayed as a best of the best soldier. Of course, Germans were the best army in the world at the time. And And, well, Barbarossa really shows it. During the summer of 41, all those stereotypes, all this thought in summer, not the winter, not autumn, not whatever you think, but the days, those early days of Barbarossa when the operation began, all those thoughts hit a wall. Germans are thinking to themselves during this operation right now, they are fighting through, and they are thinking to themselves, they are writing a report. Yes, we are beating the Soviet army. Yes, we are pushing through. We are closing into Minsk. Soviet army does fight though. It doesn't fight like we do. It doesn't have this organization. It lacks organization. We are superior in organization to them. Luftwaffe just destroyed almost everything that was hard to destroy for infantry. Almost everything. But Soviet soldier, when surrounded in a cauldron, like in Brest, or just a random place in Ukraine or Eastern, or in, let's say, the Eastern Poland at the time, he's surrounded and he has nowhere to go. So what he does, he doesn't give up to the Germans. He doesn't just wave his hands and says, okay, I did my best. No. The brainwashing, as I said before, it motivates him, because if he gives up to the Germans, he doesn't know what will happen. So maybe I will surrender, maybe not. But if the Red Army will come back and he's still in captivity of the Germans and the Soviet Union liberated him, his fellows, he knows that he will be sent to a gulag or just shot in the same place where he stood after they find him. That this fear, this stupidity, that this brainwashing, this paranoia incentivizes itself with a basic human, with this basic soldier on the front line of the Red Army. And they all start to see this ain't no walk in a park. The irony is that the German fighting about Russia didn't start on the front line, but in the bureaus of OKW and OKH, that is OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, and OKH, Oberkommando des Heeres. They were arguing what will be the goals and what to focus on during this campaign, what cities to take, what regions to take, what Russian forces we have to destroy first, and where to deploy our biggest forces too. From one side we had General Franz Halder, and from the other side Adolf Hitler. I must say it is phenomenal. It's wonderful how such a country, such a totalitarian country with only one guy on top who tells everybody what to do, couldn't formulate a single plan for Barbarossa. There was multiple plans that were active at the same time during Operation Barbarossa. Since the second half of 1940, Germans were testing, playing games, and seeing how this simulation of Barbarossa will do. First there was a plan of General Marx, then was a plan of General Losberg, and after that came a plan of General Paulus himself. Layers upon layers of plans and testing of operations. And all of those tests led that the first term will be good. There will be a lot of problems, especially with logistics, but we will manage because we are fighting an enemy that is, well, we are basically not fighting humans, so we will win. That's what they thought to themselves. German general planning about Barbarossa was anarchy. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what enemy are they going to really fight, how to achieve this victory. How are we supposed to get to the AA line? That's insanity. But oh well, the Aryan spirit will provide, as it always did. We won against France after all. Hitler wanted something totally different than OKH wanted. So imagine this situation. You are General Halder for a minute, and Hitler tells you what objects, what territories we should take to survive this war. But you have other generals and yourself knowing that you are a better strategist than Hitler. So you listen to Hitler, but do a completely different plan. That was the situation of OKH and their general planning. But of course, they do put some of the Hitler's objectives and realize them, not to make the Führer suspicious of your actions, of course. But what Hitler wanted, what was the objectives that Hitler wanted? Well, since he became a politician, well, of course, as he written in Mein Kampf, conquer East, conquer the Lebensraum, and drive out or exterminate through Hungerplan the Slavs Finns and all those different peoples, so the Germans can live on them as slave masters, basically, of those conquered peoples. Of course, if they survived. Of course, if Hitler was a socialist, nationalist, or what he really wanted, what was the politics that he chose, is a topic on its own differently, because Hitler was a Hitler. He wasn't a socialist or a nationalist. He wanted his own personal dream, but I ain't gonna talk about that right now. In October 1939, Hitler visited Warsaw to observe a parade. Then he was directed to a dinner on an airfield with, of course, all the Wehrmacht generals and higher staff. And when he was looking at this airfield, he said to his officers, "Here we will build an entrance base into the Soviet Union for the future operations in the East." Which basically means we will build infrastructure here for our army so they can advance against Soviet Union easier. And of course he was thinking when this attack would take place. We have to remember it was 39, that France wasn't still beaten, but soon after France fallen, immediately they were starting to begin preparations against the Soviet Union. There was a funny situation when Vyacheslav Molotov visited Berlin to harbor better relations with Nazi Germany and to ask them about the pact, Ribbentrop-Molotov, what is going to happen in the future, that there should be like trade and all that stuff. And at the same time, Hitler was signing papers that, yes, we need like 10,000 soldiers in like the near the Brest-Litovsk area, just in case, Of course, Stalin wasn't oblivious to what was happening on his western border. He wasn't stupid, but he wasn't a genius either. He didn't build KGB to just guard prisoners in the gulags. No. He needed information about everything. That's why he built this fucking thing. And he knew what he wanted to use it for. And daily, there were tons of mail, daily tons of reports coming from KGB that Germans are kind of building up a lot of stuff on our border. In 41, the number of reports only grew. There was only more and more reports, and Stalin knew that the attack would happen, but he didn't want to provoke Hitler into an earlier attack with mobilizing his entire army. Of course, the Soviet army increased in size from 3 million to 5 million during this time, but it's like a Schrodinger's cat. They were ready for the German invasion, and at the same time, they weren't ready for the German invasion. But let's go back to Adolf Hitler, and how did he wanted to defeat Soviet Union? Which is really a fundamental question which was presented to his generals. I mean, they saw the situation, they knew what we're dealing with. Soviet Union or the territories of Russia weren't conquered since the time of the Mongol Empire. In modern times, it's quite hard to imagine to conquer such a beast. I mean, most of Russia or the Soviet Union doesn't even lay in Europe. It lays in Asia. As Russia did lose a lot of wars, and I mean a lot of wars, since the Crimean War to the Japanese conflicts, and also let's not forget the World War I. Even Germans, who imposed upon them Brest-Litovsk Treaty, didn't occupy much of Russia. They occupied Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic states, but not much of Russia itself. So as you can see, General Paulus had a problem. He knew that with this given limited time and the expanse of Russia, Barbarossa wouldn't be possible to finish. Of course, the campaign that was structured by the German army so far, that is main thrust towards the capital, destroy the forces on the border, and keep pushing forward, until we completely eradicate the enemy's army, and this is how we achieve the victory. This wasn't possible with such a huge country, not to mention that the Soviet army wouldn't be just stationed on the border, but on the entirety of the Soviet Empire. So OKH thought to themselves that this campaign must be different. It cannot be structured to capture Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad, because that would just be nothing. That would be too little. The Soviet Union also was a totalitarian regime, and even if those cities fell, it would have kept fighting against them. Imagine that Paulus walks up to his higher-ups and tells them that this is impossible. What the hell are you trying me to do? I'm not planning. This is insanity. I can conquer Baltic states, Belarus, Ukraine. Maybe that's it. Maybe not even that. So his higher-ups just told him, What the hell are you talking about? We told you what you have to do, and you will do it whenever you like it or not. Are we gonna find a different general that will accept our offers and our demands? Yeah, the classic military problem: do not report that there are problems. Report that everything is in order. That is in every military, everywhere. Just don't take my word. Just if you have somebody in the military, just ask them, and he will tell you I'm right about that. They really don't like when you say there is something bad going on. So, he reported that everything is in order after that. It wasn't. So they started just gaslighting themselves that everything is in order. There's just Paulus and all those generals started telling themselves, oh, the Soviet Union will collapse on its own after this invasion, and their army will be like gone. They'll just, lay down their weapons. I mean, those are subhumans after all, so nothing to worry about. We will achieve a total victory. Most generals that were planning this operation thought to themselves that in the first phase of the war, Red Army will be destroyed. They planned for a border war. I don't know how to say this, but they just planned for like an invasion of Poland or France, basically. That's what they planned for. They thought they are going up against Indians. Like they thought themselves that they are the General Custer and those Slavs are Indians. That was the situation that they're thinking to themselves. They are not planning for a war that will take years, that will drag them into the mud and will force them to test their true strength. They are not thinking that. They are thinking this is just another Poland for them. Maybe a bigger one, but still a Poland. But let us remember that those are only German generals. They are trained in tactics, not strategy. To them, a war is a battle between armies, not countries' economies, but military on the ground. Know where to put their soldiers, how to put their soldiers, how to maneuver their soldiers, what objectives to take and how to take them. But they fail to see that the country is fighting the war, not the army. At the end, their formulaic plan to conquer Soviet Russia was destroy their army in a grand battle on the border and then chase them so hard that you will drive them on. They will be destroyed by just this drive of yours, and they will be gone. After they are gone, guess what? There is nothing standing between you and the victory. Also, there is a funny thing that this operation was also known as the Railroad Campaign, because the chase would take place alongside the railroads of the Soviet Russia. Of course, that's what they did, but the problem was a lot of those railroads were destroyed, so their deployments were very limited. And let's not forget that the railroad that Soviet Russia built was different to those of Europe and Nazi Germany. Imagine this. Imagine a cone that's expanding. The more water you fill into it. That was the situation of this operation, basically. So you have to pour more and more water to fill the cone. But at some point there's a problem. You just run out of the water. And the cone is half empty or half full, whatever you prefer. This cone-shaped border that was expanding, that was the problem of the German army. Not that they couldn't beat the Soviets, but that they had to spread their army across more and more and more. So what they wanted to do was just stop at the Volga and defend that point, because if they entered Asia, well, guess what? The cone grows bigger. There's Kazakhstan up there. There is Siberia. There's Urals. It's unimaginable how big it is for an army. That they even wanted to reach AA line, or that is the Volga, or like all those parts. That is crazy to me. I don't see how they would have won that. Of course they didn't, so I don't have to imagine, really. The smallest border which they started from was this Prussia, Carpathians, Romania. That was the smallest border they started from, and it only went bigger, bigger, bigger from that point on. The funny thing is that even if they conquered all of the European part of the Soviet Union, there is still one okrug in Soviet Russia, on the closest to them, that still has 40 million people that can be recruited. They can still make tanks, planes. Their industry is still standing. This one okrug. And let's not forget that they will be still given aid from the Western allies. Real campaign that is a victorious campaign, and we can see it in France or Poland, well, less in France, but definitely in Poland and Benelux, is that they destroy the industry of Poland, of Yugoslavia. They just paralyze the country, and the country cannot spew out divisions, cannot spew out the recruits. It's too late. It's too little. Their army, what can army do? Army gonna run out of manpower or ammunition sooner or later, and their industry cannot be rebuilt that easy. So it's basically over. But with the Soviet Union, guess what happened? They got to Leningrad, they got to Moscow, they got to Stalingrad. So those are three okrugs in Soviet Union, and there is the Perm okrug. There is a Siberian part. I don't know what city is called in Russia beyond those big mountains. I don't know if it was Yekaterinburg or something, but there's another okrug. So they have 5 okrugs in total. That is industry, manpower, recruitment base, all that stuff. It's still standing. Maybe they lost Belarus. Maybe they lost Ukraine, Baltics. But who cares? They still have all what they want, all what they need to fight on. Okay, let's go back to the scenario when they occupy all of European part of Soviet Union and Russia just collapses on its own, like during the revolution. And then still, the German army doesn't plan to go beyond that point, to go beyond the AA line. They still don't care to go beyond that. It's too much for them to handle. It's not like they just fight the Russian army, there's partisans. They have to put up garrisons to control the land, the people that are working there. It's not such an easy task. Also a funny thing, which Hitler said, that even if Soviet Union didn't collapse and survive this invasion, then we can just put planes near like Saratov or Kaluga, and the Luftwaffe will just bomb Soviet Union, but we will stay on Volga. We don't care. We will not advance beyond that point. But the Luftwaffe can do what they want beyond that point. German General Staff was planning this invasion for almost a year, and Wehrmacht's capabilities to this point was 300, 400, 600 kilometers at best. 600 at best. And here they have to traverse 2,000 kilometers. This was just hearing it. You don't have to imagine it. You don't have to be a soldier. You don't have to be a planner. You don't have to know how much that is. Just hearing that it's double, it's enough to make you question it. So, but going back to this question, what was their plan? The plan was, we have to destroy the Soviet army on the border within 3 months. And the most important part are the first 3 to 2 weeks of the fighting, when we will destroy most of their fighting capabilities or defensive capabilities. And that will be enough to win this war. But why 3 months? Why not like a year? Why did they say that? Because General Thomas was responsible for all the resources that the Wehrmacht had at the hand right now, or during the production that will be produced soon enough before the invasion. The Wehrmacht has the capabilities of about 3 months of constant fighting and attacking. That's all Germans had. 3 months of supplies. Why the Germans also fought that? Because there was a lot of known about the Red Army, but there was at the same time not much known about the Red Army. But to be specific, not much known about their recruitment bases and their mobilization. Do you know how many Soviet soldiers were up for mobilization within 3 months of the war? Red Army in 41 had 5 million soldiers. I'm gonna just ignore that. But do you know how much they could have like raised from the from the ground, let's say, with like guns and all that stuff? 10 million. 10 million soldiers ready to fight from all the okrugs, from Ukraine to the Ural Mountains. 10 million men. German generals thought that they will destroy the European portion of the army, and that will be it, because they thought that the European army that the Russia has is the only army that Soviet Union possesses at the moment. After the great battle at the border, or in the, well, say Ukraine, Belarus, and Baltic states, there will be destroyed. All of it. And only some partial or small units will be trying to stop the German advance towards Volga, but that's it. There'll be no big scale war. It will be a 1 year campaign in the worst scenario. The best scenario is 14 weeks. That yeah, they will go from Warsaw to Volga in 14 weeks. That was the base case scenario that they had, which is pretty insane. And everyone who had any negative thinking or any negative planning about this operation was quickly put down. Not like actually he wasn't killed, but he was just silenced basically, or demoted in the worst case scenario. Ignore the enemy, minimize the risk, and overestimate our capabilities. Do you know how much General Halder, estimated Soviet Union units or divisions will be deployed against them? 150 divisions. 30 cavalry divisions and 20 motorized divisions, and those were estimates. Well, of course, there was some intel too, but we have to remember that was a totalitarian regime, and Stalin held a tight grip on everyone, so it wasn't so easy to just sneak out the information. Of course, Germans knew somewhat what was going on, as there was a transformation of the Soviet army. There was constant reorganization of the divisions. The tank corps were transformed into the motorized divisions, and so on and so forth. It was really hard to just keep the track by the Germans. And imagine what the Soviets were doing with them. They didn't know what the hell was even going on in their own structure. That's how bad USSR was at the time. And prior to this, they had tank corps and tank divisions, and tank corps had like 2,000 tanks, and a tank division had like 500 tanks, and then they switched them, but they brought them back sometimes. I have no idea what the hell they were doing, and I'm gonna leave it at that. But even with those estimates, Germans thought that they have little troops, because the first estimate of how many soldiers divisions, they're gonna use against the Soviet Union was 130 divisions of German army, and they increased it to 150, and they were still scared that Soviet army is maybe bigger than 150 divisions that they estimated. So we have to increase it even more from those 150 divisions, because maybe the Soviets have 180, 200 divisions, or maybe even 400 divisions in Europe. So yeah, from this positive planning, they went into paranoia planning. But of course, then they got reminded of the Free German Army sayings, and one of them was ignore the enemy. They thought that they're just gonna roll over. They're just gonna meat grind the Soviet army. Even if the Red Army is bigger by 50 divisions, they are going to destroy it. No problem. Don't think about it. Maybe there is a lot of them, but they lack motivation. They are badly guided by their generals and by their officers. Let us not forget that the Russians have out-of-date equipment. And all this thinking came from the Great Purge of 1937 to 1939. And even Hitler, Churchill, and the US government said that this is a colossus without a head. They knew that the Red Army was many, basically. There was a lot of red soldiers. But they didn't think there was this many Red Army soldiers. 1,000 divisions just waiting for the Germans. We're also thinking that the terror demoralized the Red Army soldiers so much that he fights conventionally, badly, his morale is down, he doesn't care about the system. The best case scenario for a Red Army soldier is that he may fire a few shots in the air and run away. They thought of them as just primitives with clubs, basically. And to be honest, the Russian culture that they brought to Europe after they beat the German army, I guess they were not that far off. You read those reports, yeah, they write planes are out of date, tanks are out of date, soldiers are bad, Soviet Union bad, basically. But what they fail to present is how many of this thing can be mobilized. How many soldiers will they actually face? They have no idea how this totalitarian regime, central system that was created by Stalin, can fastly mobilize the masses and to, of course, defend the borders and his regime. So basically their plan is we will smash so hard and so fast and take their mobilization core, and he will not have enough time to put those soldiers, this fresh recruit, against us. Oh, how wrong they were. There was also a ploy against Hitler with General Halder, because Hitler didn't want to advance on Moscow, as ridiculous as it may sound, and General Halder wanted to advance on Moscow. His main troop was put on the central line towards Moscow. They wanted to capture Moscow to paralyze the Soviet Union. That was in their mind. That was the idea in their mind, basically. But what Hitler saw was a Napoleonic mistake. Napoleon got himself fixated about this Moscow, Moscow, Moscow. Who cares about Moscow? If we take Moscow, the Soviet Union is still standing. I don't care about Moscow. I'm gonna attack on the flanks. I'm gonna take Leningrad. I'm gonna take Stalingrad. I'm gonna take Ukraine. I'm gonna get Caucasus and its oil, and then I'm gonna be continuing the fight against the Soviet Union in maybe a prolonged war if it will not work. And the way the Halder, that is, presents to Hitler his plan, which he doesn't tell him he wants to take Moscow. He doesn't mention Moscow at all. He says that, yes, mein Führer, I will be attacking the flanks, as you said. I need to take over Belarus, basically, for you. I need to take over Belarus, so my thrust must go beyond Belarus, so we can secure and isolate Leningrad. Of course, he was lying to his face, basically, about that, because he wanted to take Belarus and then drive on towards Moscow. It was like a magnet, just pulling those German generals. The Moscow was a magnet to the German generals. It was pulling them closer and closer. Come to me, basically. But Hitler didn't want that, so they had to lie to him about what they are going to do. And the funny thing is, Hitler said, yes, you can do this thrust through Smolensk. It's fine. You have my answer. You can do it. It's all written in the Directive 21 about Operation Barbarossa. I'm not making this shit up because I know people will think I'm just making stuff up, but just like I have documents just open in front of my eyes right now, so I don't know what to tell you. Part of this directive is from 19th December of 1940. So if you're searching for that part, you can do it on your own. I'm not trying to stop you. Go ahead, search for it if you are not believing me. So yes, General Halder modifies this plan, basically, of taking Leningrad into the plan of taking Moscow. And marshals with Fyodor von Bock was leading the Panzer divisions heading, of course, into the Soviet Union. They all got directive to advance towards Moscow, not Leningrad. Halder just told them, yeah, Führer is just talking something about whatever, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Who cares about Leningrad? We are going for Moscow. They didn't even knew. The generals below Halder, they didn't knew that Hitler himself wants to take Leningrad instead of Moscow. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. So yes, OKH formulated a plan by modifying plans of Hitler. Then they separated the plan into northern thrust and southern thrust to just add layers of chaos onto layers of chaos. And they said, okay, this is it. This is our final plan. Halder minimalized the threat for Adolf Hitler. He also added like a small written in like small text thing where it says that if the Russian army is fighting bad or there's like no Russians on the front line towards Moscow, oh, we just gonna like snatch Moscow from them. It's fine. And Hitler just said, yeah, this is fine, and just signed under it. I don't think he even read those documents at some point because it is written like it's just a thrust towards Moscow. Just everything gets ignored. Every front line gets minimalized, but the Belarusian one. Yeah, the southern front, oh yeah, that's gonna be our small, like 20 divisions and like Romanian army taking back Ukraine from the Russians. It's fine. There's also one funny thing that General Halder was engaging in a sovereign politics towards Hungarian government. He said to the Hungarian generals that they should encourage their troops, that they should encourage their government to allow them to fight Soviet Union, basically, because Hungarian government didn't want to invade with the German Soviet Union. So he was lobbying without Hitler. He was just creating his own politics in the region for himself to just get like more divisions for himself, which is just insane. Imagine this: after the first month of the operation, they're already standing in Belarus. They already taken over Belarus, and they can take over Kiev from the south. They can just do a southern thrust in Ukraine from the north. The Führer is thinking to himself, oh, maybe I will take Kiev, maybe I will take Leningrad, or maybe Kiev and Leningrad at the same time. And the Halder is thinking, Moscow, Moscow, Moscow. Like, it's just like a sovereign politics of this general will drive Hitler crazy later on. That's why he will just stop generals later on from making any decisions on the front lines. And even if they had two separate plans and it was apparent already to Hitler that there is something wrong going on, both of those people thought to themselves that the Soviet army right now is the priority. They have to destroy the Soviet army. With limited forces with the main forces, they have to be destroyed. In Baltics and in southern Ukraine, the Red Army must die. The problem with that was that Fyodor Forbach, who was fighting the Soviet army, I don't remember where the place was, Yelnya, something like that. He destroyed first army that was sent against him, then the second, then the third. You know, there was an apparent problem that there is this mass of Red Army just coming from nowhere and keeps defending their homeland. He was fighting at the time General Timoshenko, and he had to report to Hitler that even that he destroyed all his army groups, two army groups, General Timoshenko just launched a counteroffensive in Belarus against them. There is a things which Germans thought to themselves that will happen. They will destroy the Soviet army, which didn't happen. That they are going to capture all the Soviet railroads and that is the most important Soviet railroads and already supplies of the Red Army, which they captured a lot of. They're gonna capture themselves trains, and that the tempo of their attack will just only get faster and faster with each day instead of being slowed down by the Red Army. And all of those failed. Now they have to rebuild the railroad, put their own trains on there, fight the Red Army, and bring their own supplies. So as you can see, this planning of theirs was fictional from end to beginning. It was a Nazi fiction of how they are going to win this war. And then they hit the reality, which was 10 million Red Army soldiers and logistical nightmare that they just created. After the French Republic fell to the Nazi forces, it went into the generals' heads, that is, of the Wehrmacht, that they are invincible, that there is nothing that they cannot achieve anymore. Because in World War I, they had struggled so hard to beat this country, and now it was just like nothing. It was like a nothing campaign. So why wouldn't we take over the Soviet Union like this? Let's not forget that they also fought themselves better, that they are a nation chosen by Führer and by God, and they are superior to all other races. And they were fighting at the time who? Slavs, who they saw as monkeys, apes, subhumans, cavemen. I can go on, but you get the gist. So this perception of theirs that in the East there is this evil that has to be destroyed by the civilization of the Germans, and that it will has to be settled, that is the East, by their people to bring civilization to the Slavs, either with their extermination or with their subjugation. And of course this motivated their plans, and this is why Barbarossa looked like it looked. There was a problem also of manpower, because the more people died, the more people they needed to replace. It wasn't just some Nazis coming out of a tube genetically modified to kill the Slavs. It was workers, farmers, clerks. All those people had to put on the Wehrmacht shoe, put on the Stahlhelm, train how to shoot, and fight for the Greater Reich. And because of this, there was no workers, and because of that, they had to put the Slavs in Nazi Germany to work overtime for 14, 12 hours to make them bullets, for example, or cooking utensils, anything. Let's also not forget that Germany didn't mobilize fully until 1944, which also limited their capabilities on the battlefield. The best ironic thing, what saved USSR and their army, is that their army was projected deep inside the country. Because original plan was to put most of their troops on the border with Germany. If they did that, Wehrmacht would have destroyed most of it and maybe they would have won. But the badly organized army, the structure that they created themselves, and that the chaos they created basically saved them. But even if they destroyed 80% of the Soviet soldiers and they didn't mobilize, then guess what? Do you think Hitler would have won that? He was fighting a global war. He wasn't fighting only against USSR. USSR held its ground because There was a lot of food, trains, industry, ammunition coming from US, England, colonies, France. All of those places were supplying USSR in the fight against the Nazis. That's why they won. Not because Germans were stupid, basically, although their planning seems to be this fantastic, but because they were fighting a global coalition. USSR would have not survived alone without the Allied help. And this is just a fact. They would have starved. And there was already a lot of starvation going on even with the US help. I talked a lot about this German plan of Barbarossa, and it was doomed to fail. In this scenario where they are fighting the entire world, then they have to attack the Soviet Union as well. This would have not worked. Even if Hitler got his wishes, Barbarossa would have failed. But it's not fundamental that Barbarossa failed. It's that the German army failed. It failed to destroy the Soviet army. It failed to reach the point that it was given. It was too weak to just destroy such a massive communist monster. The moment USSR attacked, Stalin switched the economy to mass mobilization. Every man was supposed to be a soldier. Every factory was turned into a military one. Soviets could spit out so much out of them that the German army made no difference if it was better trained, if there was a ratio of 1 German soldier to 12 Soviet soldiers. Soviet Russia lost from 23 to 26 million people in this war. And that is with, of course, Allied help. But even without it, even if they lost 40 million people in this war, they still would have won. Because Hitler was fighting a global coalition. Because Russia, for his weak army, was just too big. Hitler famously said to Heinz Guderian, "If I knew how many tanks Red Army had, I would have never started this campaign." And with this, I will end this episode. Thank you for watching.